Good afternoon and welcome to our today's webinar. My name is Susana Atalaya. I'm Learning and Development Manager at Nova SBE Executive Education. I'm going to be host today in the webinar Breakaway Strategies by João Castro. Before we start, I present you João Castro. I would like to remind you that this webinar is an initiative within our Role Play campaign, which is a movement that aims to help individuals and organizations meet challenges of the new paradigm, placing the expertise of our faculty, partners, market leaders at the service of the community. A couple of organizational topics before. I will be more than happy to receive questions from you on the Q&A space on the bottom Zoom bar. So at the end of the webinar, we can create a brief discussion around the raised topics. Lastly, for registration of technical occurrences, feel free to use the chat. Without further delay, I now present you João Castro, a trained engineer with a PhD from MIT, several years of experience in managing innovation projects, and who is a faculty member at Nova SBE, where he designed the Digital Experience Lab. João Castro, are you ready? The stage is yours.
Hello everyone, just clicking on all the buttons. Let's get started. Thank you, Susanna, for this introduction. And thank you all of those who are watching for spending this time together with us. And so for today's webinar, what I'd like to bring and share with you is a little bit about these experiences and how organizations take some of these challenging times and trying to figure out how they can innovate and how they can find new ways of doing business and how they can escape this trap of the regular business that they've been doing so far, and they can find these new opportunities. But as I go through this, I also would like to make some comments regarding the context in which we are. So this is a picture of a small plaque that I found once in a trip to Amsterdam and there. And this is supposed to be when we're outside of the home, right? So home is where your Wi-Fi connects automatically. Well, our devices are connecting automatically now because we're stranded at home. But we have all these homes away from home. And it is about all these different connections that we're eager to have back. And so sort of a Easter egg, and I chose to do this webinar today with you guys with two friends or paintings from two great friends of mine, Ricardo and Mafalda, and just make sure that this is more about just us driving businesses, looking for profits. It's about also the human connections that we want to really establish. So I just wanted to make that point when we start with this first slide. Now, definitely the times there are changing, right? Bob Dylan was talking about the civil society movement in the United States when things were changing, but this is a change, and that was brought to us by nature. And a lot of times when we talk about how to try to get organizations to do things differently, to figure out new types of business, new models, new products, new services, we always talk about, hey, how do we convince the organization that it's the time to change? How do we convince an organization that is set and established on its traditional way of operating to try to explore different ways of doing? Well, this time the opportunity is that the pitch was made by nature, right? There's no selling to the organization. I think it's pretty obvious around us what is happening. And so now everyone is on this burning platform. This is an opportunity that we have to react to, we have to adapt to, but it's also the opportunity for us to try to explore and figure new things out. Now, this is the cover of Economist, and those of you who know me in class know how much I love to use the covers of the Economist to make my arguments, and this is a very, very powerful one of what just happened to us. And we're at a standstill now, and we need to explore. But what kind of exploration are we going to do? And that leads me to another cover of the Economist, one of my favorites, which is this one, right? Will we ever invent anything this useful again? And the tinier font, the blue font below is the growing debate about dwindling innovation. So is it really this? And so this is a 2013 cover of The Economist. So it's quite old. And it's of a time when we were debating if phones should have, if rounded corners on phones should count as something that would be patentable. But we're being stricken with many big challenges these days. And so we definitely need to get our game on to try to figure out how we're going to sort this out. So this is a big challenge. And this is probably likely the biggest challenge that I've faced in my lifetime. But it's not the first one. And so this is when, that's what I'd like to share today. This is when we can go and look at some of the other cases and learn from those and trying to explore different ways of figuring out how we're going to get out of this situation where we're in. So, two quotes. One by Herbert Simon, so Nobel laureate. And it is now clear that the elaborate organizations that human beings have constructed in the modern world can only be understood as machinery for coping with the limit of man's abilities to comprehend and compute in the face of complex and uncertainty. Right? So these organizations that we somehow come up with, we fully don't understand them. And this is the boundary of which we're trying to expand upon. We know business, we know operations, we know the business models, we know the products of what we have. We definitely don't know what's next, what's lying just ahead. And so George Orwell, and I was fondly reminded of this one recently, is he put it in a nice way, is to see what is in front of one's nose needs a constant struggle, right? It's hard. We are able to understand and familiarize ourselves and create models of what is surrounding us. It's very hard for us to try to conceptualize what could be other models, what could be other ways. And so how do we do that? Okay. And what I bring for today is just this discussion on this. It's not a solution. And I also typically try to say this, like, hey, if you're counting on having the recipe for the chocolate cake by the end of my class or this seminar or webinar, I unfortunately don't have it. I love this exploration. It's something that we can do together. And so Suzanne also opened up the Q&A for you to be able to pose some of your questions, and we can start this dialogue and try to exploring these things. But definitely, I don't have that recipe. And so what others would tell you is that the cake is a lie if someone has promised you cake. But I have some stories to tell, some stories to share that I'd like to bring to you. So as we move about. Back in 2001, I had the opportunity to work at Cisco Systems in the Silicon Valley. And Cisco was facing one of its toughest challenges then, because this was at the burst of the dot-com bubble. And one of the things that that company created in terms of its strategy was what I chose to use for today's topic, or the title of today's webinar, is the breakaway strategy. Something that we're talking about a lot was this breakaway strategy. And everyone was looking at Cisco. Everyone wanted to figure out what are they doing and how are they doing, because all the companies, the dot-com companies, they were all retreating. They were trying to regroup. This new economy that had been bubbling up for the last 6 years, it kind of just burst. And Cisco was on this breakaway strategy. And their main thing was, well, this is a very sporadic event. This is something exceptional. So they talked about the 100-year flood. And if we understand this as it is, things will go back to a different future. We understand, Cisco understood, that networking, the internet, things like that, they're inevitable. They'll come back. We'll be able to explore them. So they kept developing their technology. They kept betting on their business other than retreating. And the truth is that, so this is John Chambers on the slide here, the CEO. The truth is that the company is still around. It is the one of the first to use high quality video conferencing for solutions like this with telepresence. Actually, the one that we're using today, Zoom, was started by someone who worked at Cisco in these teleconference systems, left to start Zoom. So they're the seed of a lot of this innovation here. And if you look back, companies like Nortel, Lucent, 3Com, these are names that you probably haven't heard in a long time, but these were the competitors of Cisco back then. They've all disappeared. Like the breakaway strategy, this idea that you can bet on the future and you try to understand what the future could be and you work for that, that's what made Cisco successful and is still a big company today. Okay? So this is one of the points, this breakaway strategy. Well, I understand that there's a future, there's going to be a future, we're going to be developing towards that, and we're going to be a very relevant company once things come back to normal. So that's something that we could rely on. Now, a few years later, I find myself in Cambridge, and I'm going to this particular job fair. I was studying at MIT back then. Went to this job fair, and I saw something there, which was surprising because you see the date. And just 2 days before, this company called Lehman Brothers had filed for bankruptcy. And one of the I don't know how to put this into word, but one of the things that was surprising to see is that there's one booth, one company that was supposed to be hiring there. The only thing that was there was this box that had been shipped with all these materials that they were the brochures and the T-shirts and things that they give out by Lehman Brothers. There was no one there. The change was sudden, drastic. Everything stopped. Okay, but this was the crisis of 2008. So at first we talked about the dot-coms. Now we're talking about the financial crisis of 2008. And here other things came out of it. Many things came out of it. But one example is Square. Jack Dorsey started Square inspired by something that he saw, that someone was trying to make a payment and wasn't able to make a payment. And he seized that opportunity and created a company, and he got into the payments business. And so this is something that I think is also interesting. Try to figure out, try to see, there are many different examples of people exploring these opportunities. Now, how do we frame ourselves? How do we try to look and how do we think about the future? And so there are some interesting frameworks for that, and we don't have enough time to go really in deep to them, but I want to quickly share some of them with you and leave some additional literature for in the end if you want to dive deeper into them. But so here's just a few highlights, few pointers of where to start. Semmelweis. Semmelweis is another one of those thinkers that you should go up and look his story, and given the pandemics and things that we're going through, he was able to first figure out that there was something there. He couldn't explain the mechanism, but had the intuition by looking at data of the different scenarios that he was comparing, that the doctors were carrying the bug that would create the disease that was affecting so many mothers and recent borns. So he died a pauper, he was ostracized by his community, but he was able to think ahead. And so he wasn't afraid to share this vision of what could be. A different example, and this one is, I think, easy for you to just search on YouTube and look it up, is the Lost interview. Not the last, the Lost interview by Steve Jobs, which was an interview which was considered to be lost for a long time. And then someone surfaced a cassette from under a sofa somewhere, and now it's up, and you certainly find it on YouTube. One of the things he talks about is how organizations work, and he definitely understands there something of when he got kicked out of Apple, and how that organization used to work, how it used to operate, and how it was driven not by the people who were designing products, but by the people who were designing or were controlling marketing and sales. And the cultures are different. And so it's interesting to see his understanding of how the business mechanics work, and to try and understand and question yourself, the organization that you're in, what kind of organization are you? And what might you be missing that you want to take into account? So I think this is a entertainment, food for thought. I think it's a great interview. Fortunately, someone found it, so it's no longer really the lost interview. Now, quick frameworks. Try to set your thinking into, okay, probably a lot of us are thinking on horizon 0, right? What's going to happen next week? Are schools going to open? Are people going to be allowed to go back to business? Leave their homes? A lot of countries, a lot of people are still in confinement. So what is going to happen? At horizon 0, that's more than fair. But start thinking, what might be just after that? And in about 6 months, and in about a year, in about a couple of years. So establish yourself and allow yourself some time to think, to escape that. Okay, I don't care about next week. Something's going to happen, and you can't really control for it right now. You can try to influence, but what can you influence, and what can you work on that is further down the road? What can you start to prepare to build for then? Okay. Look for opportunities elsewhere. This is Henry Ford. It's told about that he got an inspiration for the assembly line, for his plants, from visiting a slaughterhouse. So in the slaughterhouse, you have the animal that's coming in, and it's been torn piece by piece apart to be sold. And he figured out, well, maybe that's a car in reverse. So look at other businesses. Look at what they're doing. Try to escape the norms of your business, the procedures, the processes, the rules, the establishment. Try to figure out, so in order to create this breakaway, this opportunity to look for different things. Here's an example. One happening now. So this is street photographers. So those who are who like photography, but those who also do it as their job, as their profession. They, not being able to go outside, they went into a computer game called Red Dead Redemption 2. And inside that game, they weren't playing the game. They were figuring out how to set up the scenarios, and they were taking pictures. They were exercising their art, their craft, inside a computer game. How do you adapt to different situations? How do you bring some of the things that you're able to do into a different context? And that, I think this is an interesting example. Now, also, how do we think? How do we establish ourselves to think ahead? And so we were talking about horizons. Maybe we really jump far ahead, right? And then you think, and that's what this slide is about. How do we tease ourselves? How do we come back to our current reality so we understand how are we going to get to that later horizon? And we do that by establishing from the future to the present is like, what would have to be true to get to that state? And you walk backwards. That way you establish your path to what is in the future. Okay? Another example, and I invite you to also look this up. This is Apple's prototype of what September 2005, you can see up in the corner, of what could become or would become later on their developments of the iPhone. Because the iPhone came out in January 2007. Okay, so they were already working on the iPhone, and they were just doing experiments. So this, you could consider it a prototype. Actually, they got a little bit dragged a bit into the mud here because you call this the phone of the future, the cover of the Wired, but they were learning. They definitely were learning, and they came out with this big product. So also allow yourself some time to learn, to prototype, to create on this thing. Now, before I go into my book recommendations and then open up the time for some discussion, this is probably the framework that I use the most in the current times to evaluate how sound my premise of these scenarios, of these opportunities really are. It's the Strategy Cascade by Roger Martin, worked together with A.G. Lafley and Jennifer Reel. And it's a very simple cascade. It's a very simple framework where you have these 5 questions. And the book that better describes it is the one that you see on the top, the Playing to Win. And then there's a complement with Creating Great Choices by Jennifer Reel. But it's a very, very, very simple framework where it really asks you the hard questions, and you're designing strategy even if you don't want to. And it's actually asking honest questions. So what is your winning aspirations? Where will you play? Who are you going to cater to? It is about making choices and helping you establish those choices. And so if there's anything that you're considering, be it a startup or a new venture that you're trying to get into, or something that you're trying to evaluate, what's the future of your legacy business, the one that you used to have, and how much will it go forward? I'd probably try to run it through this framework to see how well it holds, and also to try to help you understand better other areas of how you can probably make it stronger if it has the potential to do that. Okay? So And I said that I would share some opportunities for you to dive deeper into some of these things. And so some books that I enjoyed, and I think are great food for thought in a process as you are on your way to elaborating your own cake. And I hope you do. Scott Anthony wrote this book. It's a Little Black Book of Innovation. It's a book in two areas. One is a little bit of story of innovation. I think it's great, but especially it has a diary, 28 days, 28 exercises, 28 questions to help you figure out what you're doing. Are you not leaving anything out from your organization? Who do you want to rally? What kind of systems do you want to develop and everything? I think this is a handbook that's great to have and just go back to every now and then. So definitely one of my favorites. In a different mood, two books, 15 Inventions That Shaped the Modern Economy. So let's get some inspiration from history, right? I already shared a few cases. I love to collect some of these. I think this is probably the best collection, and it's really a great format for the times that we're in. Very, very short stories. If you want, you can look it up. There's a podcast with all these different stories for free. It's done by the BBC. And so I think it's great for inspiration. On another note, so this soonish is about these out there, a little bit out there, a little bit very fun, but really also plausible. So if you will, science fiction of what's probably around the corner. So 10 emerging technologies that will improve and or ruin everything. It's fun. I definitely do recommend it. Now, my last three, and then I just have something to wrap up. Stephen Johnson's on Farsighted, so helping you make these decisions on something that you can't see. Mitch Resnick's from MIT as well. Lifelong Kindergarten. So how he and his team are establishing and looking at all these different tools and systems and how we learn. How do we as animals learn? How do we explore? How do we find this novelty? And I think this is very interesting to try and understand. So what can we explore in this time that we're in? And finally, Kevin Kelly with The Inevitable, which is about technologies and really not about technology. So it doesn't go like, oh, this is technology A, this is technology B, this is technology C, and there's a laundry list of them. But it is about these forces around them that makes us, how do we adapt to all this software that we no longer own but we use? And what kind of momentum is that bringing into our society, our organizations, and us as people? And how do we adapt to that? I think that these are kind of musts in this space. Okay. Now, I think I'm slightly over my time, but I just wanted to share one last thing that I had brought to share with you. Is a quote that I found from on John Maeda's blog. John Maeda is a designer. He was director of the MIT Media Lab and the Rhode Island School of Design for a while. And on one point he's writing about a friend, and he shares something. He shares something about confidence. So I think that's an important message for us leading into the future that we need to tackle just tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, and our confidence to face it. And he writes about this. So confidence is a funny thing. It's necessary for you to do absolutely anything in life. Too little confidence, and you're unable to act. Too much confidence, and you're unable to hear. And so this is the sweet spot that we need to be in. We need to have enough confidence that we're going to move forward, that we're going to build new things, new systems, new society, new values, and let's do it. But also, let's keep our eyes and ears open. Let's absorb as much information as we can. Let's be inspired by what we have around us. Let's just make it happen. Okay? So I went fast through some things, some frameworks, some ideas, some concepts, but essentially we need to move forward. There's a great opportunity for us to do that. There are tools that will allow us to do that. And let's just engage in this conversation. So I guess now it's time for questions if you have. Susanna, can you help me here and let me know if people have asked questions?
Yes, thank you very much for this interesting conversation with us. We have here a question address that asks, what role will technology play in this exploration?
Oh yeah, sure. Well, that's right in my backyard, right? So I'm a trained engineer, electrical engineer, and with digital technologies, that's one of the types of technologies that I'm looking at. I think we also have biotech, so life sciences areas. We're going to have definitely technology of the day that we're going to help that. But with regards to the ones that I'm most knowledgeable, definitely they're going to help us find new ways of to work. We're doing these webinars. People are from home still doing meetings, trying to get things done for the types of tasks that are possible to be done remotely and through computers. But also we're going to be able to leverage this, just this thought experiment. How would we be able to cope with this coronavirus, COVID-19, if it wasn't COVID-19, but it was COVID-82, right? 1982. How would we cope with this? We wouldn't be able to do these webinars. We wouldn't be able to, there were few people with computers at home to work from home. So the productivity of society almost 40 years ago would be completely different. And so these are some of the things that we already can do. And I'm sure that people that are figuring out ways to recombine tools that are around the corner are already available. So artificial intelligence, the blockchain, autonomous vehicles. If people can't move about, but we need goods to move about, right? Maybe now that we don't have people on the roads is a good time to run some of these experiments to try to get some of these things around or control for a space. I know that the Portuguese government is doing these technology-free zones, which is a great incentive to create this exploration. And it's about technology and leveraging this technology to be able to do these things. So definitely technology is going to play a big role in this exploration.
Okay, we have here another question. So Breakaway seems to appear at the end of a path and a strategy to win.
So it's something that you can be thinking about even before you reach the end of that path, right? So as you evolve and you're figuring that out, try to find these alternatives. Yes, you could say that some of these were radicals, like Semmelweis. He was confronted with people dying. Ford was not. Ford, when he saw the assembly line, or he had the idea for an assembly line, he was like many other automobile manufacturers back then. Okay, so he wasn't at the end of the path, but he found this diverging opportunity to do this. Now, the strategies the playing to win strategy cascade is one that allows you to, when looking at these opportunities, it's kind of like a truth serum that's given to you to try to figure out, really look into the mirror and say, hey, is this going to work or not? So it avoids the trap of you falling in love with your own idea. It helps you avoid that trap.
Okay, thank you. We have here another interesting question by Tomás Santos. Don't you think that society needs more time to change? 45 days, it's few time to change, or our society is fast enough to absorb and evolve about the COVID?
Well, I think we were society is very agile, right? I think one of the great things from the Portuguese, some say, success story, when compared to Italy and Spain, and that's even that is debatable, is how quickly schools closed and some businesses stopped, even before the government told people to go home. So that I think shows how nimble and agile society can be. It is going to be tough for us to get used to these new ways of doing things, but we've been getting by, right? It is not what we were used to in terms of productivity. I have 2 kids at home. They're going through school, and I'm trying to get work done. My attention span is probably like of a goldfish. It's very different to be focused and things like that. So that's going to be hard, and it's going to take a longer time to adapt, definitely. And some of these solutions, people are prototyping some of these solutions, and maybe we also saw some examples with that. For instance, People were just grabbing 3D printers wherever they could find. And for instance, I gave away, or I lent the 3D printer that I had in the digital lab just to produce face masks, just because we needed them so quickly. And off it went, and it's doing that. People in IT got around tons of different initiatives, just trying to coalesce and building these apps, these websites, these services, just try to coordinate things. Of course, yes, it's a mess, right? How many face masks are we producing? No one really knows. Are those the ones that we need? Is that the priority? Do we need other types? Things like that. We're still evolving. So it's not like you just turn on the light and it's done. But it's great as how reactive we are. And at least from my perspective and what I've been seeing, I love to see the way that things have been doing. But it's also a dangerous time, right? With a lot of confusion, a lot of misinformation. Some people are well-intentioned, others have different intentions. So yeah, we'll see things that will take 10 years to materialize. We're counting months until the vaccine. And everyone is, I'd say that everyone who knows how to do this is focused on trying to do this. And so it's not like you can get the classic proverb of you can get nine women to deliver a baby in 1 month. It takes time. Just because we're so many doing these things, it is going to take time. So some of these things we'll see, right?
Okay, João, thank you very much. We have here lots of questions, but I unfortunately have only time for one more. So I will ask the last question, and then perhaps I can share with you afterwards the other questions, and then you perhaps can answer.
Yeah, sure. Inspiration. I'll write something up, try to answer these questions, and we can post it on our website.
Okay, so last question. By Sofia Rebelo. Thank you for breaking my day, an insightful seminar. My question is, through all the open channels of listening and learning during this challenge, could connecting and collaborating with other people and projects, otherwise isolated, be one of the innovations of this challenge?
Well, Sofia, thank you for the kind feedback, and definitely, I think that trying to find different people, different stakeholders, is definitely a way to do this cross-pollination. Let's mix our expertise of who knows what and try to figure out new ways of approaching how to do this business. I'm an advisor to a few companies and startups, and that's one of the things that we've been looking at and trying to tell them is, hey, we were used to and we were focused as that organization doing one thing, right? And now we're facing this issue of we're no longer going to be doing this. So let's just lay off these people because we can't do that. But what are these people actually good at? Can't they be lent? So some other organization can borrow. Let's figure out a way to just move these people about. Let's be really reactive so they can bring their expertise of what they're good at to a different area, right? There are a few companies that did this. They understood that they could do this. They were big enough, and they understood that they had people that were able to do this. So they're airline companies that have their processes, right, of safety processes. And they say, hey, we can do this applied to a different domain. But that's themselves moving, shifting their people to doing something different. But I'd love to see, I think what at least I got from your question is, hey, can we coordinate people to let them connect differently so they actually can, maybe they'll start something new, they'll respond to something at the moment, they'll just have, hey, I think we saw that. Well, people coming out in neighborhoods to help their elders, right? It's elders that they're neighbors that they don't even know, but they now understand that they are limited in their mobility and they need to be helped, right? And so this is a way for how people can bring their skills, their abilities, even simple abilities, to help each other. And so I think that's a great point. It's can't we mix all these different people with different skills, different specialties, different capabilities, right? Capacity to do this work. I'm a little bit swamped with trying to run things at home, but yeah, we're on a mission, and we need to do all these different things. And so everyone needs to help and do what they can do to this. So I think that's a great question.
Thank you very much, João, and thank you very much to all. We hope that this webinar was inspiring and that we were able to give you some food for thought, and that you perhaps opened your mind, and we helped you looking for new opportunities that you could do to help your breakaway strategy in your organization or in your life. We invite you to address your questions at our website, rolltoplay.novaspe.pt. Well, you also can access all of the other webinars because we record each one, and you are invited to assist them whenever you feel it's a good time for you. So thank you very much for joining us, and we'll meet again tomorrow for a webinar about business as usual by Helga Stewart, as unusual, sorry, by Helga Stewart at the same place, at the same hour, every day at 6 p.m. Stay safe and have a nice evening. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Thank you.